Thanks for joining us to process yellow cedar bark. This is what the bark looks like as we strip it off the tree. We have 3 little bundles right here just to show you what it looks like with the veins of sap coming through. And then we have a little crock pot here. I'm going to scoot these over because we've already got some of the bark cooking in this nice crock pot. We crock pot this for a few days to soften the bark and to cook the sap out. So I'm going to use the backside of one of these little pins and see if we can show you what this looks like. So if I go like this, I can actually scoop, ooh, that's hot. This little gooey stuff is the sap that's coming out of the bark itself, right? So this is one of the bundles that got put in here, and you can see there's like, oh, it's so sticky. You can see all the sticky stuff all over in here on the bark. So that is coming out. And we change this every 6 to 12 hours, sometimes every 12 hours, but also in the middle of the night as much as possible, to really get all the sap out of this, because once we're spinning it into our wool, into the mountain goat, we don't want the sap to be sticking everywhere. So once this has been cooking and changing water, we're going to get it to the point that it looks like a little bit like pulled pork. So it gets a little darker and it gets really thin. This is one that I just soaked this in here, so forgive me as it gets a tiny bit sappy. I'm going to pull that out of the hot water. So this has been cooked for 3 days and there is no sticky stuff inside. It has a residual sticky from being in the pot with its new one, but what we're going to do with this yellow cedar bark, you can see, right? So that came from this brightness to a little darker as it got cooked. And we're going to take our pin, P-I-N, and start stripping it into tiny pieces. So we're going to start pulling it apart. And we want to get it down to like a Glide dental floss thin, or a little thicker than that if you like, depending on how you want your bark to be. And I always line them up by length. So if there's super long ones and then like medium ones. And of course these guys, I don't want to have to spin with something that's just this long. So I'll put those to the side and take them back out into nature and give them back to the birds, back to the animals, so they can do something with them. So I'm going to go through and split my bark into pieces, strip it down. Some spinners choose not to split their bark into pieces like this, and they'll just pull off sections and throw it into their spinning as they're working on it. And that is one way to do it. I just love the consistency that I can control when I pre-split all of my bark this way. So that's the way my mother, Clarissa Rizal, taught me. So I do it this way, split it down. So this one's really shredding into pieces, and I'm just going to let those tiny pieces go, put those to the side. There's a little variety in here, so I'm going to let that one. We might get a smaller piece out of this. But yeah, perfect. So we'll put this one over. Oh, nope, that's going to let go. Let go. So save that long one. I really love the pieces that are about as long as an arm's reach, or like the heart, from your heart to your wrist or heart to your finger, that long. That's kind of ideal for spinning. They don't tangle too much, but they also don't have to be added every few times that you roll your hand down your leg. This one is pretty fragmented, nicely pulled pork here. Pulled pork cedar, that's what I like. Okay, really splitting this down. If you go back a few hundred years, the ratio in our historical blankets was different, the alternate of what we're doing now with merino wool. When we're spinning with merino and cedar, we're using a higher volume of merino than cedar bark because merino is easier to get at this point. But when we go back to using our mountain goat, as we start spinning this into mountain goat, we're going to want a higher volume of cedar bark because the mountain goat is so laborious to process. So I'm going to put that one over there. Keep that one. I'm trying to keep them fairly consistent in thickness, right? Or thinness, if you want to call it that. Take the little fragments off. That's it. We're going to keep going on all of this until we have quite a volume to spin into our mountain goat. Ooh, that's getting really thin. Here we go. Get those. And we're going to let these dry, right? So that when we start spinning again, we can just submerge them in water and go to town with it. This is a decent length, like I would probably consider using it, but if you can tell how thin it is, it's just a little too thin for my liking, so I'm gonna let the birds have that one. And then we're gonna go here. If you find a bit of the bark that is a little bit thicker this way, right, so it's a little taller this way, you can take your needle on the halfway and kind of go into it long ways. What is that called? Like you're splitting a hot dog bun instead. You can split it that direction. Very cool. Okay. So that's it. We'll keep going and keep going until we have all of our bark ready to spin, and then we'll get to spinning.